Uh-oh.
How was everyone this morning?
Great.
Woo!
Fantastic. Beautiful day. Well, welcome to the Center for Social Change. How many of you here are here for the first time today? Fantastic. Well, welcome. I'll explain just a little bit about who we are at the center, and then I'll introduce our fantastic presenters today. Well, my name is Lauren Harper, and I'm the Director of Programs here at the Center for Social Change, and we are this hub for change makers and change making in South Florida. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means we have a physical space, which you're in right now, physical space for social change organizations, nonprofits, for-profits, social entrepreneurs to work together. And we also have programs and services to help them, whether it's with respect to launching, with respect to accelerating their impact and growth. We also have this kind of think tank portion to what we do, where we have a social change lab sort of thing, where we find social innovations working in other places, and we try to bring them here. And then we also try to find out what's working here, and we help to scale those efforts. We try to find inflection points of organization and try to help them get to that next level. So, you know, part of the mission, of course, is to partner with amazing organizations that bring funding and other resources, such as findCRA. And I'd love to introduce you today the founders of findCRA, Ben Lowley and Brian Waters, and they're going to talk to you, of course, about how to obtain CRA funding for your nonprofit. And welcome you today. And if you didn't sign in, we have a sign-in sheet. And oh yeah, just housekeeping things. If you need to use the restroom, there's a restroom key that's right here, and the restroom is pretty much right where you walked in. If you're facing the exit to the right. So welcome here today, and please continue.
Thanks, Lauren. Welcome everybody to Unlocking the Vault. Just to clear up any confusion, this is not about how to crack a safe or breaking banks. We're going to teach you about partnering with banks today. My name is Ben. This is Brian. We co-founded findCRA together about 3 years ago. It's come a long way. We're really happy to be here speaking with you all this morning. So I'll get right into it. We got a lot to cover, but we'll try to keep it as light and interesting as possible. So keys for building bank partnerships. The first section would make sense to go over would be an overview of the Community Reinvestment Act, what it is, and what it requires banks to do. The second part, we'll talk about strategies for how to build successful partnerships. And in the third part, we will kind of go over what we do at findCRA and how we can help you build those partnerships. So, CRA. In this section, we'll cover an overview and talk about what it is, why it got started, what qualifies, and bank exam considerations, how they divide up the banks and examine them under the CRA to make sure they're compliant. So this is a short definition of it. We try to sum it up, and it's one sentence. It's a federal law. It obligates every bank to give back to their communities, and by that it means where they have branches, where do they operate. They have to give loans to meet their credit needs, and the bigger the bank gets, they need to do donations, grants, and provide volunteer services through technical assistance or sitting on boards, that sort of thing. And to talk a little bit about why I got started, back in the early part of the century, as urban areas began to really pop up, there were certain lower income minority neighborhoods were being left out of the financial system in a very unfair way. And this is an example of redlining that you can see in Philadelphia here. It was common practice in most of the large urban areas in our country that banks would go in and essentially just redline and mark off where they weren't going to do loans. We're not going to lend anyone here. And in order to do that, we're going to raise fees and rates beyond anything that they could ever afford, or we're just going to flat out deny them as soon as they walk through the door. So in Chicago is actually where all of the advocacy and people started to organize to combat this. And Gail Sincata, I don't know if anyone's familiar with the CRA history, but she was really the champion for this cause. She began organizing groups in Chicago, and they took on Washington. They passed through all the legislation, and they got it passed in 1977. And today, it's really become this great act of that involves a cycle of need and support, where banks are going out, understanding what's going on in the communities where they operate, to figure out what those needs are, and then they are hopefully meeting those needs as best they can. They have to hire a lot of staff. They have CRA officers to track and report all of their activities, and they also, loan officers have to, on a daily basis, are taking in applications from lower income residents of their communities. Communities benefit greatly from this through access to financial services. And if it's a big bank, they're going to be investing in large tax credit projects for new infrastructure, new housing. A lot of the most important parts of the backbone of the community, banks are right there financing it all along the way. And citizens ultimately benefit from these through their everyday life. It improves your quality of life. And charities, which most of everyone in here, I believe, represents, is here to learn about how they can help their own charity. Banks need you guys to understand what the needs are in the community. So charities serve as great partners for banks to meet their requirements. And now we're going to get into a little bit more of the basic technical details. Brian has 20 years of compliance experience working in a large bank based out of Louisville, Kentucky. He's sat through exams, he's talked to examiners, and he's answered all the hard questions. He is a wealth of knowledge, and I'm going to hand it over to him and think about him. Okay.
All right, good morning, everyone. I'm going to go back to this slide for a second, because I want to know how many charities and nonprofits we have in the room. And Ben said, I was talking about this last night, and I was going to make everybody stand up, but everybody seems settled in. So just raise your hand if you are representing a nonprofit or a charity. All right, now keep your hand up if you've gotten money from a bank to support your nonprofit or charity. Did you get that money? Keep your hand up if you use CRA as a tool to do that. So we've got some people in the room that have had exposure to CRA and know something about it, and we hope that for those of you that don't or aren't familiar with the Community Reinvestment Act, we're going to add some insight. For those that you are, we've got some strategies we're going to go through to help maximize that based on our experience. And Ben did a great introduction about my experience working in a bank. I left the banking sector about a year ago. I was doing both, so it was kind of very schizophrenic for a while, looking at being a banker and then trying to run an organization that helps nonprofits to work with bankers. But I'm glad to be a co-founder of findCRA and able to share some of this inside knowledge. So we want to go through some of the basic tenets of CRA. I think it's good to have an understanding of what the bankers are thinking about when they're looking at nonprofits and charities and who they're going to support and why they're making those decisions. The Community Reinvestment Act, at its core, is focused on two things: which people are benefiting from the activities and what areas receive those support. And so it really looks at two primary factors when it talks about the people. And they look to see if the people, the individuals and families who benefit, are low and moderate income. They also look to see, if they're not looking at low and moderate income people, does the initiative benefit small business owners or individuals that are trying to start small businesses? Entrepreneurs, small farmers are also included in that as well. And they looked for ways, yes?
Do they have a formal definition of small business?
They do. So a small business is defined, it's based on the Small Business Administration standards. It's any small business or small farm that has less than $1 million in gross revenue in any one reporting year, one reporting tax year.
What were the definitions with under 100 employees for SBA?
For SBA, but it's the gross income threshold that qualifies for CRA. And there's a really technical reason why. There's a data report that has to go up every year. And on that data report, that's where the demarcation line is. So the banks only have to put businesses on the data reporting that meet that threshold, and then that's rolled into CRA. We also want to talk about what is low income. So, morning. Low income is 50% or less than an area's average income. So every year HUD publishes the average income for an area. If an individual or family is 50% or less than that, they're considered low income. Low income does not always equate directly to whether someone is above or below poverty level. Often people at the poverty level are significantly low income. You can have families that are working every day, they have an income coming in. In 2015, the income level equated to $26,741 for the household. And anyone at or below that was low income, which was about 23% of the US population. You take that up to moderate income, which means that the family is at 80% or less of the average. And if you look at the average income for the United States, that would be $42,785 or less would be the moderate income level, and about 40% of the US population falls in. It's more than you think. We also talked a little bit about the CRA geographies. So we looked at the people, we looked at the small businesses. If the organization or the program is supporting individuals or businesses that fall into those categories, it's CRA. But if it's not, you can then look to what geography is going to benefit from the activities that you're doing. And that again is looking at low and moderate income census tracts, which are areas that are high populations of low and moderate income people. So when you look at the average income in a census tract, which is defined by the Census Bureau, and it's usually a small section of a zip code or a small section of a city, they look at the average income in that census tract and say whether the census tract is low or moderate. There's also special CRA geographies. They're very few and far between. They're mostly rural, where because of population runoff, because of employment downturns, because of disasters that have happened, they can be considered underserved, distressed, or disaster areas. And anything a bank does in those areas counts for CRA, but they have to be designated as such. And all that's available on the FFIEC.com website, and it explains what those areas are. And finally, from time to time, especially in urban areas, there'll be areas that are demarked as needed for economic development, revitalization, and stabilization. Those areas also, if they've been designated as such, will qualify for CRA activity if a bank participates in those areas.
Sorry, where can we check if that's the case?
You go out to ffiec.gov, and the FFIEC is the Federal Financial Institutions Examination Council. It's the biggest acronym that says nothing that the government ever created. And it publishes every year a list of the distressed, rural, and disaster areas. And they have a whole section on their website devoted to CRA resources. So a lot of what we're going to cover is covered out there much more in depth. So that's an overview of the basic tenets: low and moderate income, small business, CRA geographies. Within that criteria, there's 4 different types of activities that qualify for CRA. And did everyone get a copy of the takeaway? It looks like this. Ben's holding it up. Now you can pass it out.
No.
Okay, so here's, I'll take it. On the back of this is a breakdown of the activity type. And we didn't want to cram all of this into the presentation. This is taking a government resource and trying to pare it down to a 1 page in normal terms, and it's still very technical. We're going to talk through some examples in each of these categories. So what a bank is looking for when they're thinking about CRA is not only, is this low moderate income, is this a small business, they're also thinking about these types of activities. And specifically, when they're looking at your nonprofit and your charity, they're saying, are you doing these types of activities in order to help fit that CRA budget? And the first thing we want to talk about is community development lending. And community development lending is primarily focused on affordable housing. So that can be affordable housing to individuals, whether you're financing the purchase, the refinance, the rehab of their homes, or it can be larger initiatives like vacant lot remediation, abandoned home property rebuilding, community development on a larger scale. You think of an organization like Habitat for Humanity, what they do is affordable housing initiatives. It can also be large scale multifamily development. So anything that you're creating to create affordable housing units, any loans related to that, from the construction phase all the way through the permanent phase, would qualify for affordable housing if it meets low and moderate income people or low and moderate income neighborhoods. In here too, there's opportunities to do small business lending and small farm lending, and we talked about the definition to businesses with less than $1 million in annual revenue. Any loan that a bank generates to a business with less than $1 million automatically counts for CRA. Another thing that falls in here is government lending programs. So Veterans Administration, Federal Housing Association, state housing financing loans. Any loans done under those programs also count for community development lending. And the last piece are the big development loans, the large-scale multi-million-dollar deals for economic development, for community rehab, to build new facilities, new infrastructure, to revitalize and stabilize neighborhoods. Another area that banks look at is community services. So this is looking at, when they look at the nonprofit, who's the nonprofit benefiting? And there's a long list of different types of organizations and services that are available on the website of what qualifies as a community service. But also under this is where the bank activity comes in, where the bankers are giving back themselves to the community, which can be through their own volunteerism. And there's a really small slice within CRA that talks about technical assistance. So when a banker shows up at your nonprofit to volunteer, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to get CRA credit for volunteering. Because within CRA, they have to be doing something that they're using their financial expertise for. So it's whether they're sitting on your loan committee, whether they're sitting on your board and providing financial guidance, if they're doing fundraising for you, if they're doing money counting, if they're doing anything that's related to their technical expertise, the bank gets to count that as a CRA service. Otherwise, they're just a community volunteer and it doesn't count to their CRA performance. This also looks at financial products and services the bank may be offering, second chance checking, low cost services like money remittance or small dollar loan alternatives in comparison to payday loans or other high dollar loans would fall into the service area. The third is investment, which is giving back to the community through dollars, whether that's the bank's own grants and donations they give back to nonprofits. It can also be larger scale initiatives like bond financing or tax credit programs, low income tax credits, new market tax credits, where money from the bank is going back into the community directly. In this section, though, also in-kind donations falls into this. So this would include if a bank is donating their community space or computers or old furniture to nonprofit. All of that would fall under community investment. And finally, we've talked throughout this about revitalization and stabilization, which is specially carved out in looking at programs that are bringing infrastructure, services, and infrastructure, anchor businesses, employment, job creation into neighborhoods that need additional revitalization or stabilization. Questions? Yes?
The bank can mix these any way they want?
The bank can mix these any way they want, and they often look for opportunities that fill more than one bucket at a time. So, and we're going to get into that in the strategy session, that a lot of times when you're submitting grants, they're thinking about requesting money from a bank, they're going to be thinking about not only do I get this credit, but which of these other buckets am I getting credit in at the same time. The more complex the investment, or the more complex the opportunity, the more benefit the bank gets out of it. Yes?
Is the requirement based on the actual branch, the location, or is it split up like with a region and then it totals it up?
CRA is based on what they call an assessment area. So when the bankers, the CRA officer and their staff, they have to define what those assessment areas will be. And they can either choose that it's an entire metropolitan area, or they can choose counties within that area. So, and it's usually based on where they have a physical location. So if I am in Miami, and I only have a branch in Miami-Dade County, I'm not going to take the entire Miami metropolitan area, which includes West Palm Beach, Broward County, and all these other areas. I only want to work in the county where I have a presence.
So it's not actual like neighborhoods?
It's not actual
like
neighborhoods.
Blocks.
They can't get that small. If they say that they're in Miami, and they say that they're in Miami-Dade County, they're responsible for showing performance in all of the areas within Miami-Dade County. Because that's what redlining was. They would move into a high-income area, and then we would say, this is my neighborhood, and I'm only going to help the 1% in this neighborhood, and ignore all of the other need in the county where I'm questions about activity types? The other thing to think about, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but it's important to know, is banks are further subdivided into 3 different sizes. And it's all based on these asset tests. So if you have this amount of assets in 2 years, you're small. And there's these intermediate, small, and large. But from your perspective, why that matters is small banks are only examined on loans or lending activity. So if you're going to a bank that has less than 1.2 billion in their total assets, which you can find on the FDIC's website, you can look for what they call, being really technical here, a beeper report. But you can just go out and Google bank asset size, and it will tell you what their asset size is. The CRA website also, you can look for banks, and it will tell you which of these categories a bank falls in. But if you go to a small bank and you say, I want you to give me this donation because it's CRA qualified, they're going to say, that's great. We don't get tested for CRA. We don't care if it's CRA qualified. We still may give it to you because we want to support the community, but it's not any benefit to them from CRA. CRA further, when you look at lending, it's tested in all 3. And lending is so important to the banks because it counts double. So anything they do in lending counts twice. They also look at the biggest banks, look at investment in services separately. And then in the middle banks, those are combined into a test that they call community development. Yes?
Lending can be at market rate, though?
It can be at market rate. Definitely can be. And there was this tone probably 10 years ago with the market crisis that CRA caused the market crisis, and that's not the case. What you see with CRA lending, even though it might be higher loan to values, it might be first-time home buyers, the delinquency rates in CRA portfolios do not vary much from normal bank portfolios. And banks don't have to give away CRA loans for free. They can make them at market rate, they can charge additional fees on them. They don't want to be predatory, of course, but they can make money on CRA portfolios. So we talked about the different activities. Those fall into 3 buckets. I was talking about this just a second ago. Every bank has to look at their lending performance. This is the best test if you're outside of a bank to try to figure out how banks are being evaluated. Because the way this rating is given is there's standardized data that has to be reported out every March by every bank in the United States. And that data is called Home Mortgage Disclosure Act data, or HMDA, and CRA data. And there's all these tick marks, and there are people in banks that sit around all day and look through files and say, this is a 1, this column's a 5, this column's a 3, but it all goes up to the FFIEC, and they produce aggregate reports. So you can go to any community in the United States and say, where does this bank set with all the other banks in their community, and all the other banks that are similarly regulated, and all the other banks that are their sizes? It's the most objective, non-subjective test in CRA. The next thing they look at is investments. What is the bank's record of giving back to the community? And then finally, services. This is giving back through money. This is giving back through products and investment, and then volunteerism. All of that gets combined into a CRA rating. And banks are examined, and they get 6 different ratings every year. They get compliance ratings, they get risk ratings, they get trust ratings. CRA is the only rating that's available to the public, because this is a public service examination. How are you giving back? So it should be public. You can go out to any bank in the United States and pull their CRA evaluation. If you like to torture yourself, you can try to read the CRA evaluation. There'll be 90, 100, Wells at Fargo's, I think, is 900 pages. It's charts and analysis, and they're done every 1 to 5 years, depending on what the rating is and how big the bank is. So at the bank I worked at, we had 3 different charters. Our main bank was about a $4 billion bank. It had several national programs. They examined us every 2 years. We had another bank here in Florida for several years. It was a $80 million bank. So it was only examined every 5 years, and they were tested differently because they were different size banks. But all of that comes to 1 of 4 ratings. Either get an outstanding, a satisfactory, it needs to improve, or a substantial noncompliance. You look at all the banks last year. There's about 7,000 banks in the United States. They examined 1,300 last year. 94% of the banks fell into satisfactory, which means that they're doing good enough. They're doing what they're supposed to. They're not doing anything exceptional, but they are meeting their obligations to their communities. Around 8% fall into outstanding, which means they're blowing it out of the water. And most of those banks are larger banks that devote an entire team of people to CRA. Community development officers, financial literacy instructors, that all they do is full-time CRA. And then you have about 4% of banks that fall into needs to improve, which means in one or more of the areas they have a problem, but they have a chance to correct it. And a lot of that you see, especially in the market we're in, banks are merging, they're acquiring new markets, they're maybe geographically distant, and they're still trying to figure out how to serve that new bank, so they'll get a bad rating while they're working through that. This is where you don't want it. This is why this person's freaking out. 2 banks last year got a substantial non-compliance, which means you've got a big problem. And this is where you see banks that have discrimination records, they have true redlining going on, they've got other problems that have happened that they really are ignoring the needs of the community. And they are examined much more closely, and often an examiner is put in the bank until they figure out what's wrong.
And does the bank have to pay for that?
The bank does not have to pay for it monetarily, but they do end up paying for it because they have to spend time, they have to hire staff. We've had a bank that we've talked to that has had a needs to improve for 6 years. And in that time, they've had 3 exams. They first added 8 people to staff and put a senior person in as a CRA officer. They got another exam. They've now added 10 more people to staff and put in another senior level person in as above the other senior level person. They've devoted billions of dollars into the community. So all of that's capital coming out from somewhere.
Is that a good place to go to ask for money?
It is in some cases because they have an immediate need, but often they're so swirling around themselves trying to figure out it can be very confusing to get into it. The other thing about banks that are needs to improve it does have a constriction on their growth. So if they had aggressive growth plans, they can't merge, they can't acquire, they can't even open a new branch, even in their communities, until they get this fixed. So, yes?
I'm familiar with CRA and how you can use these exams to, kind of get in and negotiate with banks and kind of express your needs. What I find is that these CRA exams, if you look at a bank like Wells Fargo, that exam is a national exam. That is not Wells Fargo here just in Florida. That's at a national level. But then you have a bank like Bank United, who their main office, their headquarters is here. So, there's plenty of communities, I'm sure, that we all work in that we know, like regions or a city, that have actual branches in low-income neighborhoods, and they're not doing anything. That specific branch is not doing anything for the neighborhood around them. But when you look at their CRA exam, they're over there with outstanding and satisfactory.
Right.
So, and then you gave way to it, the HMDA data, the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act, that gets more specific. That gets more specific to each individual and into the MSA, into the areas. But it's just, trying to leverage that, trying to get these local banks and the local CRA officers to really move. And it's quite challenging. And you guys deal with the banks on a national level, or is it a local level, or is it both?
It's both. And
Okay.
we'll go through, that's a good lead into the next session. We're going to talk about what we call the decision labyrinth and how complex that is. What we don't cover here, but we'll talk about it briefly, we went to the National Community Reinvestment Coalition's conference in March, and there's a movement in Congress now about this exact problem, that there's not transparency in the CRA examinations other than the mortgage data, that there's a ton of subjectivity in it. You'll look at one bank that will be doing amazing things and they'll get a satisfactory rating and there'll be 50 pages written about it. You'll see another bank that also has a satisfactory rating that is not meeting the needs of the community, and there'll be 1 page written about it. So, and all the data is maintained in PDFs on a website. You can't pull any of it down, you can't analyze any of it unless you've got some tech guru, but we don't. It's us reading those 900-page things. And it's very complicated for industry people. It's very unfair. We hear a lot of from our bankers, especially our community bankers, that it's unfair standards for them to try to compete with these national banks that have unlimited resources, but they're not examined the same way. So there are letters in Congress now trying to get a CRA modernization bill, putting a focus strictly on the examination process and really in adding more standardized reporting and subjectivity into the investment and service tests, just like we have for lending. But Congress takes a long time. questions of this section? Clicker stop. But we're in a question section anyway, so does anybody have any other questions that they'd like to talk about regarding CRA and what's going on in the CRA space from the examination perspective?
Well, I was going to say, we can go back one slide. I just wanted to. I was going to. I'm sorry.
No, I think then it might be this thing that's black. It might be your calendar.
Oh, yeah.
Because it has a calendar like come up. There you go. There we go.
Sorry, it was the one with the small, medium, and large.
Yes.
So we really don't, I guess for fundraising purposes, we just, I'm not in the lending category, so I will disregard the smaller banks.
Well, it depends. I mean, it depends on what strategy you want to deploy. If you're really going to go a grant strategy, you really want to go en masse, you want to look for banks that are worried about services, whether it's investment, whether it's part of their community development test, or if it's a separate test. The problem you have is about half the banks fall into this small category. So a lot of your true community banks are going to be ones that want to support the community. They live and work there, they want to give back. So you don't want to rule them out, you just don't want to use CRA as the tool to talk to them about it. You want to talk about your business relationship, you want to talk about the good it's going to do, just don't walk in there and talk about CRA.
Right.
Any other questions? All right, we're going to move on through. Feel free to get up and get more refreshments. So now we're going to get into some tripwires to think about when you're going into the banking world and trying to raise funding or to get volunteers or to get loans or any kind of donations, and then look at strategies for addressing those tripwires. There's 4 things we're going to cover today, and we're going to go through these one at a time, and we're going to give you a little bit of advice that we've had, some experience as a banker, some experience in working with bankers at findCRA that we've learned over the past few years. The first thing, and somebody said this to me and it really resonated, that banks are not philanthropists. Banks are businesses. They're worried about their business. They're worried about making money. Most of them have shareholders that they're accountable to. They have financials, performance reviews, and all the other stuff that goes into a corporate business. They're looking for ways to get their products and their services and their presence into the marketplace. They want loans. Banks want loans more than anything, but they don't want to give money away. They want to make a return because they want to realize capital. But the other thing they want is overall brand awareness. If you think about the number of banks in Miami or the number of banks in any major metropolitan city, and you can drive down any one of these roads, and I got a whole lesson on 25th Road versus 25th Avenue versus 25th Street, and if you would drive down one of those or any of those, and you'll see many different banks in the community. And whether they're a small bank or a large bank, they want you to come into their bank and apply for your mortgage loan and open your checking account. So they push a lot of money into making you aware that their bank exists. Add to that, the banks are changing names all the time and collapsing into each other, and it just gets more confusing. But we know banks are important contributors to the community. Not only do they give back through financial donations and support, but they are an economic engine in the community. They are large employers. I mean, I don't know if Asheville, North Carolina would be there without BB&T. You know, there are some huge employers that they're the main employers. And so we want to make sure that while they are important, we also understand that they are seen as a big player in the community and they receive more requests than they ever know what to do with. Whether you're a small community bank and you walk in, you talk to your banker and you send somebody an email, or there's a paper form you fill out, or there's a grant portal, for every request that gets funded, there's probably 50 that's over the course of the year. So it's not easy to get money and other support from a bank, and that's why CRA becomes so important, because you're giving that bank something they need when you're going in there to talk to them about it. And you're not just walking in and asking for funding, you're like, it becomes a quid pro quo. Most banks give it back to the community above and beyond CRA only, though. When you look at banks, the banks that we work with, only about 30% of their volunteer hours qualify for CRA credit. So their employees are out there volunteering, and they have their own personal causes that they do, and they go out and work in the community, and they report that back, and then the bank can analyze whether or not it counts for CRA in addition to their own corporate initiatives. About 50% of the giving is CRA qualified. So people have their own, again, their own personal causes. They have client relationships that come into play. They have clients they want to win, so they'll give them money to bring them in the door. And all of that is affecting the CRA space. So a lot of banks, especially your bigger banks, establish foundations as a way to kind of mitigate some of that, and they have a route to fund the bank fund the needs directly through the bank's capital. They can allocate money to the foundation and fund other communities through the foundation. And the nice part about CRA, as long as the foundation is funded with money from the bank, it gets to count the foundation giving as part of its CRA as well. So,
Are credit unions subject to all this as well?
that is a hot question in the market. Credit unions are not subject to this at all, and they're also not subject to a lot of other banking regulations. So that is like, for it. Where do you have a banking relationship? Banks often look to say, are you my client? Are you working with me? Or are you willing to work with me? And then I'll work with you. Financial literacy training is a whole special section of CRA that it doesn't necessarily even have to be in low and moderate income people, as long as it's financially literacy training oriented, which is teaching people about home ownership, doing counseling for credit or foreclosure. But it goes all the way down to school banking initiatives, budgeting. You think of an organization like Junior Achievement, that's all going to fall under financial literacy. Anytime you're teaching somebody about responsible finances. And then they also love the opportunity to offer bank products. So again, when I do my financial literacy training, can I also talk about my second chance checking product, or my individual development account, or my affordable first-time mortgage? Can I offer products as well? Then they're also, like any business, are also want to be aware of how they're going to get promoted for supporting your organization. Are you going to send out press releases? Are they going to be a title sponsor? Are you going to talk about them and spread the word that the bank came in as a supporter for your organization? It can be as simple as putting their name on a banner at an event or at a conference or something. But they do want to look for ways that they get the word out that they are giving back to their community. The next thing we're going to talk about is the decision maker. And these are my favorite slides, I'll just say. This is how, if I talk to my family about this, I talk to anybody that's not in either side of this mix, this is how people think you get money from the bank. You go to the bank and they hand you a check. And then you're done. And then you can go run your nonprofit and help your clients. We all know that at a bank, it starts with relationships. So when you're going to your bank, you're not talking to the bank. If you are, you might have other issues going on. You're talking to a CRA officer. You're most likely talking to a branch person, or you might be talking to a community relations person. And those people are your first gateway into the bank. You need to have a face. You need to have somebody that can kind of help you navigate the different ways that banks work. But it's much more complex than that. So this is maybe as far in as a nonprofit or a citizen as you get. Within the bank, those people are going in to their CRA committees and maybe their foundation to talk about your opportunities. So they become your representative to talk to their peers and their managers about which opportunities are we going to fund? How do these benefit our community? How are we going to get CRA credit for that? What further complicates that is all of these senior level people are sitting on these committees. So if I am a branch manager that's worried about my bonus, and I'm worried about hitting my goals, and I'm worried about my progression up the corporate ladder, I'm unlikely to go in here and argue with the CFO for any one opportunity over another. There's a lot of personal dynamics. Now you add in the layer of documents. So you've got to fill out letters of support and fill out referral forms, and this person has to talk to this person and get their signature on this. And by the way, we have a branch budget that we can give certain money out, but if it's above that, we have to go over here. And you maybe have to go to an online application portal and fill it out, and it goes over here, and hopefully it gets there. Hopefully you hear an answer. And don't forget that all of these people have interpersonal dynamics going on. Like, these people are related, and these people don't really like each other, and you happen to be that person at a lunch. So you can see that it's very complex. And who has time to do that? You all don't have time to do that. You've got to worry about all of this within your own organization. How you're going to give that money to the bank. So what we do is we try to simplify that process. You know, we have the experience of working with banks. We talk to bankers all the time. We talk to nonprofits all the time. We want to be your advocate. And And we do that because you can come and talk to us, and we'll figure out which of your needs qualify for CRA, and then we'll help craft those into what we call CRA projects. And in our file cabinet, we have these different requirements set forth for this bank needs a letter of support, this bank needs a grant application, here's what you can expect. We also learned the timing, and we work directly with the CRA officer to find out what are your needs, what is your giving profile, and where can we route requests, which banks are the best fit. So you're not wasting time going through this maze, trying to figure out and hoping to get an answer. We can streamline it and get it in to the right bank, to get it to the right committees and get the decisions back quickly and take that work off your plate. It's important to build relationships. That's what we do, and that's what you all need to do out in the community. You need to try to find your CRA officers. We call them the mythical CRA officers in many banks because they are kind of hidden in the vault. I think they're inside the vault. Often they're a person that happened to be the last one into the room. They're like, you're the CRA officer. Now you've got to go do your deposit operations and your compliance and monitor CRA at the same time. Another strategy is...
So that's not a full-time job?
Some banks it's a full-time job. I mean, my bank that I worked at, we had $4 billion in assets. We were in 6 states, 50 branches. I think we had 14 assessment areas. We had 1 person doing CRA for the entire company. So that's what's going on. That person also was in charge of all the community relations and community outreach. So
in South Florida, like most of the banks here, even the national banks, will have a CRA officer present here. It's been a huge push in South Florida for banks to have designated CRA officers.
I mean, by law, they have to have at least one. But you're right, in this market, there is a good community outreach network. And it's probably easier to find. The thing is, there's not a list. And
Right.
if you call your bank, they should be able to tell you who your CRA officer is. Maybe. Depends on if you're calling in or you're calling like a call center in another state. Because they're not going to be able to Google on their internet and say, CRA officer. But there's other contacts you may need to know too. Depending on how that decision labyrinth is set up, you may not need to talk to the CRA officer. You may need to talk to the chief investment officer or the CFO or marketing department. You know, if you're going for an event sponsorship, that's probably going to go to the marketing department or the CRA officer. The third thing we want to talk about is the timing aspect of it. And we said this before, it's not as simple as walking in and getting money. It's further complicated by scheduling. Banks often, you saw those CRA committees, those foundation committees, there's schedules that have to be worked, especially when you get all those senior level people in. Some of these committees only meet once a quarter. Some of them, I was talking to a bank last week, that their grant funding, their last grant funding for this year, the applications have to be in by July 15th. If you don't have them in, you can't apply to January. And that's all to manage these tons of requests that go in. So we work with the banks to figure out not only what the level of complexity here is, what the schedules are, but we can also often get requests into banks outside of those schedules as well. Again, most banks require some type of pre-qualification. You have to know somebody, you have to have an application or request letter. We talk through some of that decision too. So you need to learn the bank's requirements. I wish it were as simple as asking for them. Some of them are published on their website, some of them aren't out there. We talked about the complex timelines and approval structures. But some of the things to really look at if you're going to deploy a CRA strategy is to look for these events in a bank. That these can be triggers for CRA opportunity. Are they growing? Did they merge and acquire a new bank? Did they add a new market? Are they contracting a market? Do you have new decision makers in place? So did somebody tell you no a year ago, but that person's no longer at the bank, or maybe they're not the CRA officer anymore, you have a new person to talk to. Look at their CRA rating. Those are public, they're out on the FFIEC's website. You go out there, put any bank name in, you can see every CRA rating they ever got. And if you can see if their rating has gone down, they're probably panicking. To your point, they probably need to talk to community people about opportunities. Do they have an exam coming up? They're public and we publish them on our website. 30 days before a quarter, they publish a list of all the banks that are going to get examined in the next quarter. So if you've got a bank that just got told their regulators are coming in and they're deficient in their investments, they may be handing money out left and right within the next 30 days. Look at their market share, and this is what you alluded to, that with Wells Fargo, Miami's like a 0.2% market share in Wells Fargo. But when you look at Bank United, it's huge. I mean, they're primarily in Miami. So if this is their main market, they're more likely to invest in this market. Look at their available capital. Again, that's out on the FDIC's website. We talked a little bit about assessment areas. We want to make sure that you're in a bank assessment area, so look where they have branches and you're asking in the same communities. The last thing to talk about, and this is a sad truth, is it's not a level playing field out there. The loudest voices get the most support. The nonprofits that have the most development staff are going to have the most resources to go out and ask for money. Limited resources on both sides makes CRA much more difficult than it needs to be. So nonprofits, you're focused on, charities, you're focused on serving your clients, fulfilling your mission. This is a necessary evil. Where do you get funding from? Bankers, the same thing. They're worried about CRA, but they've got their jobs to do. And CRA kind of sits in this middle space. Relationships are important. You need to know who you're talking to. Look at their personal giving profiles if you can find them. Banks often, we talked about, they promote who they give to. Look to see what type of causes the bank has been giving to, and do you fit that cause profile? Some banks, especially if they have a foundation, list what causes they're looking at for that year or that cycle, and make sure that you're matching those needs. If they're looking for financial education and your goal is to help lending in affordable housing neighborhoods, you're not going to get that funding. They're not looking to fill that need right now. The sad thing is effort does not equal results always. I mean, you can work really hard on a banking relationship and never get any money out of them. Some banks you can walk in and say, I need a check, and they'll say, send me a letter, and you get the check. You know, it's not an equitable partnership. So looking at that, like I said, be sure to build a relationship. Don't be afraid to ask for feedback. If a bank only gives you part of the money, or they say no to your request, ask them why. Ask them how you can improve your grant the next time to get the funding. Because it could be something very small. You know, we had a bank that got denied for, a nonprofit that got denied for a grant because they just didn't describe the measurable outcomes in enough detail. So, you know, it can be something very small that they had the data, they just summarized it too much. You know, so you have to take those notes and make it better for the next submission to that bank or a different bank. And then I'll put a plug in here. Look for people that are familiar with the industry. Come talk to us. That's why we're here. We've developed findCRA as a tool for our nonprofit clients, so you don't have to figure all of this out. So you don't have to spend your time looking for CRA exams, looking at the PEs, looking at the FIC's website, and I can keep throwing acronyms out there because we won the financial acronym bee 3 years ago. So I got them all in my back pocket. But you don't need to know all of that. We're the market industry experts here, and we're here with Charity Services Centers and the Center for Social Change to really bring this service to you all, to find ways to open up the doors of this capital without you having to spend hours and hours figuring it out. Do you have any questions about the tripwires? Yes?
Well, this is not about the tripwires, but I was wondering if investment companies are subject to CRA's requirements, like Merrill Lynch and...
They are not.
Okay.
So they're not. The only people that are the three banks. So it really is this it was a necessary regulation at the time, but it's kind of stagnated when it was developed. It was written in 1977. It requires these basic tests. The regulation itself is only about 10 pages, but then all the guidance documents is probably 10 rooms full of stuff. So it was written as a banking regulation to address a very specific banking problem, and it's never expanded outside of that. Where other regulations, you think about like the Bank Secrecy Act, which was a regulation written for banks to worry about money laundering. Over the years, that's been spread out to everyone. All of these people you're naming, credit unions, security companies, casinos, they all have to worry about that. CRA has never grown outside of banking. Yes?
How do you make your money, and how do you choose the organization to represent?
That's what we're going to talk about next.
Good. On the introduction.
Yes.
I just wanted to, just as a useful tool for everyone in the room, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, they are a huge resource to go look at and pull the HMDA data. It will give you information on lending and small business. activity for local banks. You can specify, you can go all the way down to census tracts if you want to see what their activity is going on. And it's very user-friendly. I am not a data person, and I can go about there pretty easily. So,
What is the name of that again?
Consumer Financial Protection Bureau.
And why that's so
CFPB.
important is that's the exact same data that the regulators use.
Yep.
So if you're trying to talk to a bank about you're underperforming and you use HMDA or CRA data to do that,
They're going to take you seriously.
they're going to take you seriously because they know that their examiners are going to come in and have the same criticism. Any other questions? Yes.
I mean, anecdotally, or just hypothetically, you went. So if you're a small nonprofit, you needed, I don't know, either a sponsorship, but probably more just like a grant
Yeah.
to do something, normal programmatic stuff. Would you be best going to a bigger bank like Wells Fargo or Chase, like in Miami, or are you more likely to be successful at some of the smaller ones, or do you make the ask to all of them?
That is where it's a strategy. And you have to look at what your needs are, what your timing is, how big the request is. I mean, if you need $20,000, $25,000, you might be able to get that from a single organization. But if you're looking for $100,000 or above, you're going to have to, somebody in another session called it chunkify, you're going to have to break that up into smaller sessions and smaller sections and ask for it. A community bank is not going to write a single nonprofit. It's unlikely that they'll write a $100,000 check. You can probably get a $100,000 grant from Wells Fargo or from Bank of America or from cities, bigger banks. The problem you have with those is that's going to have to be funneled through a grant process, and then you're stuck in these extenuated time frames. You're not going to have a personal connection, and it's just going to go in and get evaluated, and a check's going to get cut out. And that's it. Really, you really have to dig into what is it the need is. All of this stuff we've gone through. What can the bank benefit from it, and then come up with a strategy to say, am I going to approach a community bank? If you are, our sweet spot for community banks are banks that are about $2 billion to $10 billion because they're big enough that they have the funding, but they're not so big that you can't get to the right.
Can you give me an example of one of those?
I think, and I don't quote me on this, I'm not sure what this is. I'm pretty sure that Bank United is going to fall in that range. C1 Bank would fall in that range. There was banks in and around Miami. I'm sorry? Yeah. So banks that are going to be true community banks, they usually only have a couple states.
And do you think it's
I'm sorry.
overwhelmingly more successful to first ask the bank that you have I guess the nonprofit has an account with?
Yes. That is proven to be true. And there are banks that say, I don't even look at a request if I don't have a relationship.
If you don't, they'll try and sell you a product or something.
Yeah, yeah. You want a line of credit?
Line of credit.
Do you have a question?
So I was going to say those relationships are key. The thing that I try to do is try to have some type of relationship with every CRA officer that serves South Florida. I think that trying to go in and ask cold is very, very difficult, especially from the smaller nonprofits. Now the big nonprofits, they have no problems. But the smaller nonprofits, if you don't have that relationship already, you're going to have issues. So I would say this, especially if you have an event coming, you want a sponsorship, or you have a particular program that you want to help get funded, to start building those relationships now. Every event that they have, go to it. When they go to other community events, please, by all means, go by the table, shake a hand, make a friend, because that's the person who's going to make the difference for you. It's very, very hard to just walk in cold and they don't know you. Even if you don't have any connection with that bank, or you don't have any accounts at that bank, them knowing you is works a whole lot better than just walking in cold. It can be way more difficult.
If you can even get anyone's attention.
Yeah. And I knew you were asking earlier about, does every bank have a CRA officer? Some of them may not. Some of them, one of the tellers is doing it. So
right.
I mean, it could be pretty much a daunting task, but
That's not their actual title, right? Or is it like the community
some of them know, but
something?
as she was saying earlier, there's been a big push here the last 2 years for all the banks to have a CRA officer, because I can tell you here in South Florida, the banks here in South Florida don't do what they're supposed to do as far as community reinvestment is concerned. But as he stated earlier, and I have a comment about that as well, as he stated earlier, 91% of them get a satisfactory. How is that possible? How is that possible if so many of them, especially the smaller nonprofits, are struggling trying to get funding for them? How is that possible? And we have bank deserts here in Dade County as well as Broward County. So there's
How is it possible?
huh?
How is it possible?
Because they get rated by the state. They get rated what they
And
do
the
in
other thing is,
statewide.
We talked about the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. The other problem that's going on in the examination industry is there's a lack of examiners. So when they created CFPB in 2010 as a response to the mortgage crisis, they took all of the seasoned people, whether by volunteering or by saying, you're now part of the CFPB, from the other regulators, and moved them to this new Consumer Protection Agency. The problem that created is, where'd all the examiners go for these people out doing these exams? So they hire people right out of school, put them through a 6-week training course and say, go do a CRA exam for this bank. And they really are using a checklist, and they don't have the experience or the market context to really understand what's at play in a market and give better ratings.
And let's be honest about something too. A lot of the regulators are former bankers.
They are.
And if they're new, like you're saying they are, what's gonna happen, and you probably can't say this, but like, so the banking industry will wine and dine them, right? I mean, they're not supposed to, but let's face it here, you're talking about corporate America, and these people trying to be successful, you know, so it needs reform, like, just
And there's,
badly.
it's one of two things. Either your biggest banks build really close relationships with their examiners, or you have community banks.
Very like,
You have community banks that are terrified of their examiners to the point that they won't even talk to them. So they don't have any relationship, and they don't have any way to talk about what they're actually doing in the community. They just kind of take whatever rating they get.
But we also have some say in that as well. And one of the things that is not known is that when the regulators come, the regulators can actually talk to us, the nonprofits, as well as we can write letters as to what the banks are doing to the regulators, and what the banks are doing in the community, and what are not doing for that matter in the community.
And again, on the FFIC website, there's a place to go to learn how to submit community letters. Do you have a question about that?
I was going to make a comment about what he said, the percentage of banks that have a satisfactory rating that don't do anything with nonprofits.
Mm-hmm.
Doing things with nonprofits has absolutely nothing to do with anything. If a bank makes loans to small businesses in areas that need it, they get a good satisfactory rating, whether they help one nonprofit or zero. That has nothing to do with it.
Well, that's true to a certain extent if they are a smaller bank. You know, lending does weigh a lot, and they do look at the lending performance.
Well, I mean, not only lending, but other services. But the point is, the banks, CRA says, attend to the business needs of the areas that need it. CRA doesn't say, give money to nonprofits. That's not the purpose of CRA.
No, the purpose, that's not exactly accurate, because CRA does have a requirement for the banks that are larger that they have to give back through investment and through service to the community. And they can't accomplish that directly only by giving back to market tax credits or for bond financing. They do have a special, and I didn't dig into all of this, they do have a special evaluation they do for the level of innovation. So a bank that's giving back only through small business lending, if they're in a market that has mortgage data and they're not meeting the mortgage needs, they can't just say we're a commercial bank and we're going to ignore it. They do have to look at all the different types they're lending, they're doing, and they can give a negative criticism. It may not affect their rating. You're right. It may not translate into the rating, but they do get criticized. And what you'll look at is when you look at the reports, they do have to evaluate performance in every state. To your point, the problem is they can go into Miami, and if they operate through the whole state, and Miami looks okay, they get a good rating for Miami, or for Florida, the entire state of Florida, even though they might be in Tampa, and they might be in other communities, Orlando and other communities in the state as well.
Yeah, but helping nonprofits is not the guiding rule of CRA.
It is not. You're 100%
It might help peripherally, but that's not the purpose of CRA.
The purpose is,
but I mean, just look at the title, Community Reinvestment. So if they have to do community reinvestment and they can't do the work that the nonprofits do, they don't help the homeless. They don't for the, and to be honest with you, here in South Florida, they definitely are not doing anything to help small businesses. They're just not. They're not doing the lending. I can run the data by you that they're not doing it. So if the object of the game is community reinvestment, just based on the title, the only ones who are actually who they can reinvest in to help the community are the nonprofits.
Well, that's not entirely true either. It's like it sits in the middle here that there is no requirement in the regulation to say that you have to help the community through nonprofit.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that's the best option.
I would agree that it is the best option, and that the banks that are really focused truly on their community meet the community needs through partnerships with the local nonprofits. You're right, they can't go out and set up 1,000 service organizations to meet the different community need areas. So it's a very complex issue, and it's in between both of these. There is no requirement that says you have to partner with nonprofits, but how else are they going to achieve it? Right?
I have a technical question.
Sure.
All right, so on the qualifying activities under CRA,
Yes.
nicely sizzled down grid that you gave us.
Yes.
The qualified investments and financial donations, last bullet point, says that donations to or investment in nonprofit organizations focused on services, housing, or providing essential support to low-income people. Those donations is what we would consider like he was saying, just programming underwriting directly. Just there's no engagement, there's no them coming in. It's just a straightforward donation, or is it we're having a gala and it's a $10,000?
From a CRA perspective, the best way that a bank can give back to the community, the A+ way to get money is a grant that is not going for an event sponsorship. Because they want to see, the examiners want to see that it's money that will help the people in the areas that need it. There's also this piece with CRA that if the money is going to support operational and staffing costs, it's less likely to get funded by the bank. They want to see that it's going to help the benefits and benefit the clients and benefits too. And there's a way, and we've counseled other nonprofits on this, to write requests that even though it's going to pay for your programming and staffing costs, you need to just focus on who's going to benefit from that staff instead of like, I need $50,000 to hire a program manager. You know, bank's gonna be like, well, I need $50,000 to hire a CRA officer and move on. You know, like, so.
But you could say, like, by doing that, by hiring this person, we'll guarantee, 20 new home buyers
Right.
in 12 months.
And it's all about what they've turned to in the last 2 years. The words we keep hearing is measurable impact, social impact. How are you going to count it? How are you going to prove that it had the effect that you said it's going to have? And we want to report back showing that whenever you say this is going to time out.
Just an aside note on that topic, we're going to have our spring nonprofit leadership series here. There's 3 workshops. One of them, the second one, is just on that topic, measuring not just the outputs, but the outcomes, right? And so if you're interested in learning more, there's a flyer outside on that.
So we have about 6 minutes left. I'm going to quickly run through a little bit about findCRA, the company, and how you can work with us. So we started out, we talked all about CRA. We could spend a week here and not cover all the facets of CRA. But what we saw, we were studying in a Federal Reserve seminar in October 2012 and heard this exact dialogue going on. But it was even worse. People were, the nonprofits were standing up and saying, I have this need, I have this need. Bankers were standing up saying, I have this need, I have this need. Exchange emails, exchange cards, and hope that we get together. We saw the opportunity to create an online matchmaking platform to streamline that process. And that's what we created with findCRA. findCRA.com is a platform that allows nonprofits to come to us, tell us what your needs are. We provide guidance and counseling to help craft those into CRA projects, and then we get those in front of the bankers to gain the support for you that you need. We're based out of Louisville, Kentucky. We were both born and bred there. I've been told I have an accent, even though I don't have an accent if you're in Louisville, if you can hear everybody else talking.
Just like we don't have an accent in my name.
Right. Yeah. I wear shoes every day, and I have all my original teeth. We did start working with Charity Services Center back back in October, we were lucky to have a partnership with them. You know, that's really opening us now to a national market. We started working with them in Philadelphia, New Jersey, and New York. In that area, we've added several partners up there. We've got several grants in process now with money going back to the community. And just this month, we've now started focusing on Miami because they're headquartered here and it makes sense that we should be working in this market with them as well. We have 94 community partners we work with. Currently, these are our nonprofits. There's also a few for-profit lenders that are doing low-cost loans for the population that needs it, and some government agencies we work with. We work with currently 32 banks, which doesn't sound like a lot, but this is their service area. So while we have 32 bank relationships, we're reaching into 17 different states with opportunities, some statewide opportunities, some national opportunities, but mostly local community opportunities in the places where we work. Yes?
How do you have 32 banks break down in those three size categories?
The 32 banks we have, the majority of them are going to fall into the large category. We have a few that are intermediate small, maybe 3 or 4. We don't have any small banks. findCRA, we try to make it as simple as possible. We do not want a decision labyrinth within findCRA. So to get started with us, you go to findCRA.com and you create a community partner profile. The nice thing about the community partner profile is it's free to register on the website as a community partner. You can have as many users at your organization as you want. So if you want to have your whole staff out here, you can tie them all to your organization, and that gives you access to list your community project on the website. Once you list the project, you can list your projects through an online portal. It's about 12 questions, and it's currently now a one-page form where you're going to talk about the need you have, how it impacts the community, the percentage of people that are LMI, the populations you're focused on, the areas you're focused on, and we also give you a space to tell us which banks you work with and which banks you don't want to work with, so we can know who to matchmake with. The process takes from start to finish maybe 20 to 30 minutes to list a project. You can also upload supporting documentation, provide pictures, and we take all of that and analyze it and turn it into a CRA community project, and we supplement that with a CRA analysis. So we're going in and providing for our bankers exactly how your project is going to match CRA. Which of those tests is it going to fall in? Which areas are going to be impacted from it? What are the census demographics of those areas to help build out the CRA side of the story? We also offer enhanced services, and Paulette asked about, or I was told to call you Tinkerbell, asked about what the differences are. We have our free module, our core module allows you to list one project at a time. You can have it out there and you can list it for free. When you go into advanced, that option is $49 a month. You can pay for a year at a time for $539 and get a month free. And that takes you up the project to the next level. We do a focused marketing campaign around the project where we're going to do email and social media push out to our bank network and other banks that we're talking to. You can also have up to 5 projects listed at a time under that module. And then finally, you get up to 3 hours of enhanced support services. So that can be anything from us creating your project for you, us writing a bank grant for you, us doing targeted matchmaking above and beyond the social promotion, where we're actually going to pull our bank preference sheets and call bankers and start dialogues about the projects, and then attend bank meetings and create your own projects.
And you said that was $549?
It's $539 a year. The other thing with our service, we're a paid for success model. So we do have a back end, what we call a successful connection fee, and it's a percentage of the funding that you raise. And if you're in our core module, it's 5%, and if you go to our advanced module, it drops down to 4%. But we only assess that fee if we're able to get you the funding you're requesting.
Does that put us in budget when you submit it?
Often, we have, it's about 50-50. Some of our nonprofits say they're just going to pay it themselves. Other ones, we build it into the ask. So when we get the money back from the bank, we're actually getting our fee with your money.
And how does the banks feel about that?
The banks have not had any issues with it so far. I would say that we do let our banks know when that happens. We've only had one person question it, and we were able to talk to them.
I'm not sure if you said this also, if you're in the advanced plan, if we're able to secure in-kind donations, like computers, office furniture, it's just $150 flat fee. We don't get involved in any of the valuation of that in-kind, and we don't get into all that. It's just $150.
Upon delivery. The other thing I wanted to show you a quick snapshot out here, and I think it would be good if you all can go out to the website and look at it. We map pinpoint every project you list, and if it's impacting multiple areas, we can pinpoint it to multiple areas. So when our bankers go out here and search, they're searching by zip code, they're searching by county, they're searching by city or by state. So just like when you're trying to rent an apartment or buy a house, we've built the same technology into our website. If I put in the county, it draws the county boundaries, it shows all the projects in that county, it lists them on the side, and then the bankers can see exactly what they're looking for. And then they can open up those individual projects and see more detail.
Do we have access to the list of projects?
You do. So you just have to be registered on the website, and like I said, it's free to register, and then you can get access to this. You can do all the same search features as well and see everything that's listed out there. Through the process, yes.
That's the projects that may or may not have been funded.
These are projects that are currently soliciting support.
Solicited.
Yeah. So whether they've been partially funded or they're new and they still need full funding, they're out there on the list.
An organization has more than one project that you're trying funding for. Would it count, would two count under that one fee structure, or would they have to register each one separately?
We would list each project separately, but the fees, it would be whatever funding were raised. So it would be as the funding comes in from the bank, we would take the percentages of the received funding.
Per month also, that'd be for the organization to register.
That's for the organization. The subscription fee is for the organization, not the individual project.
But you would have three different, did I see you would have three different submissions at once?
You have up to 5 on the advance. You have up to 5 at a time.
So each one of those projects would be one of the 5?
Yes.
Question, so if individual organizations actually list their projects, and say you have maybe 5 organizations wanting to do the exact same project, how does that reflect? Would it just be the same 5 kind of similar projects for the same area posted? Or is there a way to kind of encourage some of the groups to maybe collaborate kind of for?
We would look at the need, and
or do you?
we would have to see what the request was, and if it's a similar project, we might list it under a single organization, or we can do a partner listing. As far as having the same type of opportunities in the community, I mean, the more opportunities you have, the more attractive it's going to be for bankers in that community to look at the platform. If they come out here and there's one opportunity in Miami, they're going to be like, okay, I've seen that one opportunity. We want people to come back and see opportunities grow. The other thing we add up here across the top, you can't really see them, are filters. So the bankers can go in, or you can go in and filter down and say, I'm just looking for investments, or I'm just looking for affordable housing, or I'm just looking for 501c3 companies, and they can even narrow those results further to fit the exact needs they have. Do you have a question?
How big is your staff?
We have 3 full-time people and 4 part-time people.
Do you have another question?
Anything by having a partnership with Eastern Kentucky University?
Of course. Yes.
I was going to add one thing to her question back. What we've done with some community partners is kind of like in the background, they'll be looking for another community partner on the same type of project, and so we'll if you let us know that, we can look and see which other projects we're working on and try to make it match that way.
Sometimes when we're seeking funding, we can get as creative as we want to and as innovative, and it seems like such an attractive thing because you can take an opportunity that will be either a one-shot activation, or you can stretch it. And you can have engagement throughout the entire year, right? In your experience, what do the banks prefer?
Banks are looking for opportunities. You know, banks often will only support a nonprofit once a year. They are looking for, if you're talking about ways for the bank to engage, so let's talk about financial literacy or volunteer initiative. They are looking for opportunities for a true partnership, and I'll just go to the next slide. They want to not only give you that money up front, but they want to stay engaged with you and to build a relationship and to continue to work with your clients. And we've had our nonprofits that have structured deals, so if a bank's not willing to give $25,000 this year, they might give $7,000 over 3 years. And that those multi-year deals can be attractive too. And that can be it's more sticky for you in that relationship. If you get them locked into 3 years, especially if you have these other engagement opportunities, you know you've got a strong partnership there. Right, do you have a question?
Yeah, I did. I love that you guys are tackling a huge challenge, is access to
I'm curious as to measures of success. So with your platform, it's an alternative, right, from being going through the traditional process. When using your platform, I guess, what are these measures of success that you guys are looking at? I know you're talking about saving time, which seems to be the main component, but also increasing that success rate, right, of securing investment, donation, whatever it may be.
Right. So some of the measures of success that we look at for our nonprofit partners are not only are you saving time, because you no longer have to deal with all of this complexity. We're looking at how quickly you get the funding, and if we know that we can add our level of expertise to help increase that success rate. So when we look at the number of projects we've had listed, on average, bankers match with our projects pretty regularly, and about a third of the times that a bank, we have a term we call match, which means a bank is interested in the project. About a third of those interests end up in support back to the community. So I'll just give you a real life example. We partnered with Habitat for Humanity at Metro Rural this year, and every year, a lot of habitats do a banker's house, and they were in serious need of funding problems. They couldn't figure out how they were going to fund the banker's house this year because their largest bank donor had left them. And in the course of a month, we were able to raise over half the funding for the banker's house. We brought in 4 new bank partners. We increased gifts from 2 of their old bank partners and helped get that house built and funded within a month, just through our process of listing the project, promoting it out through email, and following up with the bankers. And that took all of the work off their plate, and they were able to submit a grant to Wells Fargo to replace the funding they lost. So they had that one engagement that they worked on, we did everything else for them. And they just told us this year that they want us to take the entire process for next year because it went so smoothly and had good results for them. Any other questions?
They don't like the co-fund thing. I mean, is there any, like, banks wouldn't want to be funding the same project, like Chase wouldn't want to be funding the same project as
CRA is the one area in banking that's not competitive like that.
Oh.
That they don't mind taking a piece of it and letting another bank come in and take another piece of it. The title sponsorships can get a little dicey, but the CRA activities, they don't care as much. If they're 500 and they only want to give 1,000, they're more than happy for somebody else to do the rest.
If it's a large investment, and a tax credit type of scenario, that can also be competitive, but we don't work quite as much on those types of projects yet.
Do you have time for me if we go back to Kentucky?
Yes, just get with me right after, and we get something scheduled. So I just want to leave with, this is our information that's in your package. The website is findCRA.com. We have both of our emails here. We're available all the time. We're small business owners, so email us anytime.
We have a new live chat feature on the
Yes.
site as well, so we try to.
So if you run into problems, somebody's there to help. So we're so thankful that you all came out today. So great to meet you. We have a lot of breakout meetings set up, but if you want to schedule one, let's talk and see when we can fit you in. And we will love to talk to you more about your individual needs.
Thank you, and for those of you that didn't get a chance to sign in and you want to make sure that both Ben and Brian have your information, the sign-in sheet is right in the middle of the room here, and there's also some surveys at your seat so that we can make sure that you're getting value out of this, so we appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks, man. There's a front and a back to the survey.
Thank you for letting me know.
We need to make that bigger on the bottom. We need like,
Oh, I didn't even see that.
Well,